Yeah. So,
I don't know why you show my picture there, but hi. Great to meet everyone virtually. So yes, I go by YG here, but my real name is Yoongi. I've been with Goldman Sachs for about 10 years now, which I know sounds crazy, but like college still feels like it was just like a year ago. So hope you're all enjoying it while you can. So yeah, your professor and I have been really close friends since college, like she mentioned. In fact, so close that she convinced me to jump on a Zoom call at 9 p.m. on a Monday night here. But look, I'm really honored and I always find it refreshing to talk to students, which reminds me of my college years. So yeah, thanks for having me today and looking forward to the conversation.
yeah. So I've collected all your questions and then sort of categorized them into distinct categories. So the first category is sort of general introduction. So I'll ask the first question and then have Mr. Min answer. So could you give us a high-level overview of what you and your team do at Goldman Sachs and how your work fits into the broader firm?
Sure. So most of you probably already know this, but I'll just like start with a quick overview of what an investment bank does, and then sort of explain what my role is. So it sounds more important than it actually is. So when you think of a retail bank like 국민은행, they give financial advice to people like you and me for things like saving money, getting a loan, buying a house, or like when you go through major life events like marriage, divorce, or like bankruptcy, right? And an investment bank does similar things, but for corporations like Samsung, Hynix, Alphabet, or governments. And when someone says they work in investment banking, they usually mean like one of two things. The first area is M&A, where bankers advise companies that want to basically buy, sell, or merge with each other. And we help them by valuing like how much the deal is worth, negotiating prices, or putting together all the like financial paperwork required to close that transaction. And the second area is capital markets, which is the world I live in. And our job is to help clients raise money to say build factories, pay employees, or nowadays like invest in AI and data centers. And we do that by helping them either do an IPO or borrow money, sort of like a 사채업자. And I'm not just joking because Goldman Sachs was literally like founded by two Jewish 사채업자s. And so finally, my job, which is not a 사채업자, but I'm with the strategist team here that drives all the quantitative financial modeling for these IPOs and debt deals when we pitch complicated solutions to our clients. So for those of you with somewhat strong mathematical or quantitative background, one career path may be to work as a quant trader at a hedge fund or work as a quantitative strategist like myself at an investment bank like Goldman or other second tier banks like JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley. Just kidding. And the big difference, I think, is that if you're in trading, which I was for the first 2 years of my career, you're mostly working in front of computer screens and rarely have to talk to any real people. Whereas if you're in investment banking, you actually spend a lot of time meeting with clients and presenting in front of like CFOs and treasurers, which I find to be the most interesting part of my job. So hopefully that answers the question.
Mhm. So what do you think are some common misconceptions of students have about investment banking versus kind of the reality of what you do
Mm.
in the industry?
Yeah, so I think one common misconception is that if you work in investment banking, you're like always under this like extremely stressful like environment nonstop, like 70, 80 hours a week. And that is a misconception. Like it's more like 90 hours. Just kidding. But I know there's this idea that IB is like always this like super stressful environment where you basically have like no time to enjoy your life. I mean, I'm not gonna lie that it's like not challenging, and especially as a junior person, you do tend to stay later at the office like compared to other industries. But I can tell you that it's usually not because of the workload itself. Of course, there are busy seasons, but in many cases, a lot of your time is actually like spent just waiting on client feedback or your manager's review. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm not saying that's a great experience or how it should be, but I do think the industry like should and is moving towards a better work-life balance. But I also think it just has to do with the nature of the client advisory business. And what I mean by that is like when you're working on a client project, it's usually for a large M&A or a financing deal, which are, when you think about it, like pretty major decisions that can potentially like determine the future of the company, at least in the near term. And because of that, like your clients naturally want to get like every single detail right and tend to just like have a lot of questions. And also like the success of that deal will also like decide our relationship with the client for the next like couple of years or even decades. But again, like I know it's not for everyone, and you will have to like sacrifice, say, like hanging out with your friends on some days. But for me and my colleagues, like those junior years, like in hindsight, weren't were not that miserable, and that's when I learned the most and built like the most valuable relationship that eventually become like a really important part of my network. And look, like after year or two, if you can't stand it, you can always pivot to a different industry, and you'll have a line of investment banking experience on your resume. So like some people think you're like chained to your desk, like working 24/7, but that's not the case. And I guess one other misconception I think people have is like people working in IB are like kind of assholes in general. And to be fair, like I do deal with a lot of like difficult people here, but most of the people I've worked with are some of the nicest and like sweetest people I've ever met. And I think this also ties back to the nature of investment banking because again, a large part of your job is like actually communicating with the clients, like often in non-work settings, like at a dinner or networking events. And as you become more senior, you actually win a lot of deals simply because a CFO or treasurer likes you and trusts you. So your personality and like likability in general are huge factors in becoming a good banker. So it's almost impossible to succeed if you come across as an asshole. So you'll genuinely meet a lot of people with great personalities in investment banking. And the same goes for the clients you meet, because if you're a CFO of a large corporation, you also need to be very likable, right? And like my MBTI start with a strong I, and you can ask your professor like just how awkward I was in college. But I say one of the greatest skills I've gained from working in this industry is like better communication skills and like better personality overall. Like I guess like that's something an asshole would say, but like you get my point.
But it must be, but out of your cohort, it's pretty uncommon to stay at Goldman for this long, right?
I think it's one of two things. Like a lot of people leave after like 2, 3 years. They usually go to like private equity, or if they can't stand the culture, they move to a completely different industry like tech or startup. Or another path like me, saying once you stay after stay for like 5 years, it kind of gets more difficult to leave. So I don't regret my decision, but I think either you leave after 2, 3 years or you become like a lifetimer like myself.
I see. All right, so that was kind of a general intro questions. Um, so we are a marketing class, so we study things like brand equity, consumer behavior, consumer psych, sentiments, kind of the four C's, four P's of marketing. So how much of your job in investment banking is driven by these qualitative factors versus technical, quantitative valuation and financial modeling?
That's a great question. The short answer is yes. Marketing is not only relevant in banking, but I think every pitch we do ultimately like comes down to marketing and storytelling. And we actually call our pitch decks like marketing materials when we send to the clients. Um, Now the technical analyses and modeling are definitely important, like something we spend days refining every detail. But I think they sort of establish the floor or baseline of what a company or deal is worth on paper. But marketing, I think, really like defines the ceiling and the potential return on the outcome. And as an example, so I oversee both like equity and debt offerings, but I think you can find like plenty of interesting equity IPO case studies online. So I'll mention one example from the debt capital markets because debt is a little bit nuanced. So investors buying equity look for growth and excitement, right? But debt investors care more about like stability and confidence. So this past January, we led a bond issuance for Alphabet, whose initial goal was to borrow $20 billion. And for a deal of that size, companies usually split the deal up into like different pieces of debt called tranches. So for example, like out of the $20 billion, like 2 billion would be like paid back in 2 years, 3 billion in 5 years, and so on, right? But if you remember, January was an interesting time because although there was like a huge excitement around AI, there were also concerns about like risk around like returns on investment and all these like massive like capital expenditures to build AI infrastructures and data centers. And also like at that time, a lot of the large tech companies were issuing debt to fund their own capex. So that meant like really heavy supply in the bond market, right? And when supply outpaces demand, like borrowing costs obviously goes up for our client, which is Alphabet. So we were thinking about like how do we give our client the edge? And as a solution, we had Alphabet include a small 1 billion debt tranche that they would promise to pay back in 100 years. We call it a century bond. And it obviously created a lot of market buzz because it was the first time a tech company had sold like a 100-year bond in like 30 years. And the thing is, like, Alphabet didn't actually need that specific tranche. It was a pure marketing strategy where we were basically telling the market, like, we're so confident that we'll be around and dominant after 100 years. So it shifted Alphabet's narrative from being this, like, pure tech hyperscaler to a more permanent, like, global infrastructure player. So it also created a lot of FOMO. Especially among European pension funds who were like looking for high credit long-term debt. And because of the scarcity factor, it created a lot of demand and resulted in like 10 times overstrike or order book. So Alphabet at the end was like able to increase their borrowing from 20 billion to 30 billion at a really cheap rates. And I think this sort of is a good example that like shows how important marketing is for a financing deal. And it's not just about like hype and excitement.
Mhm. It's nice to hear that this kind of qualitative insights about um, kind of things that I wouldn't normally think associate with investment banking, like leveraging FOMO,
Yes.
creating buzz, uh, that kind of thing, and creating impression that still matters.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it goes both
yeah,
ways. Like successful marketing campaign like could make a failed deal successful and same goes for opposite. Like there are a lot of deals that had great fundamentals, but like they mess up the marketing and the market like punishes the deal like we were so severely.
yeah. So the next topic, a lot of you asked questions on AI. So
Mm.
the first question on AI is, it's obviously a massive topic right now. I'm sure investment banking, it's not an exception. So looking 5 to 10 years into the future, do you believe that junior banker roles will still exist, or will AI
Mm.
eventually automate and replace bulk of the job?
Okay, so you got me started in AI. To answer your question directly, yes, I absolutely think junior banker roles, or like to be honest, like any entry level roles, will continue to exist and be necessary. And I believe the hiring will also bounce back from like the currently like really low levels because I think this like absurd idea that CEOs think they can just replace every junior employee with AI has been taken to an extreme. And to be honest, I think many of the recent news about these like massive layoffs like actually have little to do with AI, but more of an excuse for like companies overhiring in 2021. With that said, however, like I'm not denying the disruption that AI has brought. Like I'm a heavy user of AI myself. Um, by the way, like last year, so Goldman like randomly announced this like firm-wide AI Pioneer reward to like 100 people, and my manager like forwarded that announcement to me and said like, "Hey, YG, like congratulations for the reward." And then I was like, number one, like I had no idea that I was on the list, and the second, like no idea where the like what the like award was even about. And it turns out like I was just like one of the top users of Claude at my level, which like on average like people are like 40, 50 years on average. So Wasn't sure if I should feel good about it, but the point is like I'm a heavy AI user, and I believe that junior roles will continue to exist, but in a very different form. So this might sound like a little cliche, I guess, but the junior jobs that are definitely becoming obsolete are the ones where you act as a tool or an like sort of an extension of a workflow done by someone who's more experienced. And to give you an example, let's say I have a client meeting next week with an energy company about like the best time to do an IPO. I would make a judgment that it would be useful to show the clients things like similar IPOs in the past, like what the electricity demand projection looks like over the next 5 to 10 years, and what are the current investor sentiment towards the sector, right? So then I would ask my kwajang, who would manage the timeline, organize the work streams, and like tell the Teddy, who knows like where to source this information, for example, like from a Bloomberg terminal. And also like what kind of financial models we should build to prove our point. And then finally, like the sawan or intern would like carry out all the tasks exactly as told without having to think, right? Now this final layer of the traditional like sawan or maybe even like Teddy's job is definitely going away. So in a way, I think the level of thinking is sort of shifting upwards, meaning a sawan now exercises Teddy level or even junior 과장 level judgment. And before you say that's an unrealistic expectation, I think you already have access to all these knowledge and soon be able to train your own 사원 or intern AI agents who can carry out the manual data pulling and entry jobs that will let you take on Teddy or 과장 level responsibility. And I know some people may argue in this example, like eventually the job of the experienced Teddy or 과장 job will also be replaced by AI and like organization would be just run by AI agents talking to each other with like maybe like a few executives left at the top. But personally, like I'm skeptical of that possibility. That's just not how organizations are run. And I think there's a point where the marginal return from automation starts to sort of diminish compared to the increased like risk level and like all the madness from like letting something like that happen. And I mean, if that ever does happen, I think we'll be in a much bigger trouble as a society than just worrying about like you and me not having a job. Um, but I guess to summarize, like the takeaway is that yes, entry jobs will continue to exist, in my humble opinion, but we should shift our mindsets to focus on developing skills required to actually make judgments and generate commercial value rather than becoming a mechanical tool, right? And to be fair, like that's something that was bound to happen even without AI, I think. And AI is just like accelerating at a faster pace than like previous waves of innovation.
I'm just personally curious, like, so AI can do a lot of things just like humans can. There's like prediction,
Yep.
organizing data, consulting. So I'm just curious, like, personally, how much do you trust AI to do a comparable job to a human of
Mm,
comparable competence? And does that trust
yeah.
vary in terms of what job it performs?
That's a great question. I think any job that does not require thinking. So when you know type in questions on like Claude or like Gemini, it says like it shows a loading bar saying like thinking, right? They're not really thinking, like they're just doing like a search and just like predicting like the best probable like word that should come to next. But anything that's repeatable, doesn't require judgment, including like data fetching or manual entry job. I definitely trust that more than my like first year analyst. But whenever I ask like AI to make a judgment or come up with like a new theory, um, I still get a lot of crap and it's just not something that AI is designed to do. Maybe if they come up with a new technology that actually incorporates like a thinking process, which I'm personally a little skeptical about. I think people who are just, developing skills that are just repeatable, if it's just about like execution and speed, accuracy, like those are more reliable if you use AI agent. But I think we still have a place in making judgments and creating like new things.
You're an optimist.
Yes.
So the second question is related. In this
Mm.
rapidly evolving AI landscape, what steps should students take today to ensure that their skills remain relevant and valuable in the job market?
Okay, so a lot of this is probably something again you already heard before, but I'm just going to say it. Like I said, like first, critical thinking and judgment. I think it was about 3 years ago, like professor, when I spoke with your previous students. So for the students in the like Zoom room right now, like your 선배s, right? And back then, I told them how important developing quantitative skills and being able to like execute things quickly are really important. And while I still like sort of stand by that theory, fast forward like 2, 3 years, we all know that speed and accuracy alone aren't really skills anymore. They're becoming commodities, right? What's obviously more important now is judgment and having a skeptical eye towards everything, including AI, right? So, like whenever I see like interviews by these like AI company CEOs telling like young people that instead of trying to compete with AI, like you should learn how to become a better user of AI as a tool. And I mean, like, I've always kind of hated that narrative because I mean, you're literally threatening everyone to take away our jobs and like gaslighting us, and you expect AI to be our friends. I can't really like see the classroom like from a camera, but like, can you raise your hand if you're at least a little concerned about the direction the AI is heading right now? And yeah, I see some hands. Like I think the sentiment here is similar in US. I don't know if anyone saw the news, but right now a lot of like college graduation ceremonies are happening, and in some colleges, some current or former executives like Google's like Eric Schmidt gave a commencement speech like praising AI to be our future. And there was a lot of like booing and like backlash from the students, and like speakers like stood there like idiots, like looking like they had no idea why people are booing at them. But the irony is that I bet every one of you have used AI to complete your assignments for this class. And like your professor told me like you have your PyPill pill next week or something. And like imagine like Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT all go down next week. I'm pretty sure like a lot of you will have a panic attack, right? And that's sort of my point. AI companies and CEOs don't really care about your negative feeling towards them. All they need is your like total reliance on and addiction to their AI products. So I'm obviously not telling you to stop using AI. I think it has generally made me more productive too. But please just don't outsource your thinking to AI. Um, One habit I've been trying to build is whenever I feel the urge to immediately ask AI about something or hand over a task, like I force myself to think for like at least 15 to 30 minutes and think through the problem on my own before hitting the enter. And instead of getting that like instant dopamine hit from the immediate answer, like you'll be surprised how good it feels when after thinking it through yourself, AI gives a similar answer you came up with, or even better, when your solution turns out to be superior to or more creative than like the garbage that AI gave you. Um, and then I guess lastly, I can't emphasize this enough, like communication skills. I grew up in a generation in Korea where getting good grades and test scores was like considered the most important part of your high school and college years. And everything else like 동아리 활동, like extracurricular activities or just having hobbies in general was treated like a luxury. Um, that could not be further from the truth now, because as I alluded to earlier, some of the most like secure and irreplaceable positions in investment banking and us, I think like in almost any profession are the ones where you're able to communicate effectively with clients and market yourself. So when we interview candidates, of course, like grades and credentials matter, but let's say there's a candidate who is a genius but doesn't know how to hold a conversation or look me in the eye. And then there's another person who did less well on the technical questions but has great communication skills. I guarantee like 9 out of 10 interviewers will pick the second one. So I'm not telling you to like ditch your exams, like sign up for like different 동아리es, but like please don't fall into this trap set by AI companies trying to make like algorithms your best friends or your psychotherapists. So go out there, like learn how to communicate with real people. And if your MBTI is like more like an I, like myself, like just by just start by like talking to more of your close friends and family.
Hmm. I think this portion would be the most relevant and kind of a lot of the bulk of the questions really fell on this, on career development.
Mm,
So reflecting on your own career path, what's the single best piece of professional advice you've ever received yourself?
mm,
And I guess you can also answer the second question. If you were to go back in university,
uh,
what are some top skills you would build?
yeah. So, I guess for the first question, I don't think there's a single piece of advice like someone gave me that like really resonated with me. But there is one rule I guess I try to live by whenever I feel tempted to like take the easy way out. And that is if something feels like too good to be true or too easy compared to the amount of effort you put in, that's usually a red flag. And you have to sort of step back and ask yourself, am I actually learning anything from this? Like, for example, going back to AI again, like I've started seeing a lot of people like vibe coding a website or like doing really quick research on something and then like bragging about it. Like, I built this cool financial model or business idea in like 3 hours. And I'm like, well, if you can do that, a million other people can probably do it too, like including some like elementary school students like using Cloud Code. And it's probably not a skill that's going to get you your next job or get funding for your startup, right? And the same goes for your career, I guess. Like if you've offered an internship or a position that feels too like way too easy to get, the work itself is undemanding, and your boss is like too nice and says, good job no matter what. That's usually a warning sign, and you might be missing out on opportunities to like build your professional muscles. And you're developing this like feedback loop that's going to be really hard to break when you face like real pressure in life. So might sound a little bit like a conde here, but I believe real growth happens when you're under pressure and you feel the most vulnerable. So next time something feels a little too comfortable or like too good to be true, like ask yourself, like, am I choosing short-term comfort at the expense of my long-term growth? Right. And I guess the second question, if you're back in university, too. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I usually try not to give like advice because everyone's situation is different, and I think I kind of already hit my limit today. But I'll just share one thing that I believe it cannot be a bad investment, and that's just like physical fitness, right? So for me, building this workout routine and like going to gym at least 4 days a week, I think is a single best habit I've developed in college. And I essentially like follow the same routine for like 10 years now. And some of you might be thinking like I'll just start working out after I graduate and once I start working, but like trust me, that's really difficult. And I see it with my friends and even with like our junior analysts at work. So once your career starts, like your time and energy gets like pulled into so many directions, and starting from scratch then is very tough. And even if you do that, I think it's very different. Like, like especially for guys like who dream of like making like six pack one day, it's relatively easy if you begin in college, but after 25, like it becomes like almost impossible. And obviously, I'm not saying everyone needs to become like a Helchang, but like try to make exercise part of your like life early on, and I guarantee that your future self will like be really thankful of that decision. And obviously, it doesn't have to be weight training. It can be like running, swimming, cycling, anything you enjoy. But I think also the key is to choose something you can like realistically do for 30 minutes to an hour every day without too much preparation. So like sports like soccer, like maybe skiing, they're great, but they either require a lot of people or significant time commitment, which makes them harder to sustain once you get like busy with the career, right? And then one last thing, if there's like a cool 자격증, and I'm not talking about like computer 활용, like 컴활 자격증 or like something that's not tied to your career, but like tied to your personal interests. I think college is the best time to get it. So if you already enjoy doing something, like see if there's a license or a credential like connected to it. So like for example, like a level two barista license if you like coffee, or maybe like a CPR certification. Like these aren't just practical, like they can help you like stand out in networking settings and like actually help you with your career. So, for example, like I got my entry level bartender license in college, and in New York, we host a lot of like networking events for finance professionals, like both Korean and non-Korean. And these events like sometimes require a certified bartender to serve alcohol. And I've volunteered for a like couple of ones, and it actually led to a lot of like great connections for me. And anyways, like I suggest you to develop a hobby that shows off like an interesting part of your personality, and also develop a healthy routine, like no matter what it is, something that you think you can realistically commit to for the next like 10 to 20 years.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I cannot agree more with the physical fitness being at the very basis of anything and everything you do. Um, So the last question, and then I'll let you take questions from students, is for students here in Korea, what is the best way to position themselves for international opportunities, whether it's internship, whether it's a job position abroad, or even after they start working here, there might be
Mhm.
opportunities to relocate abroad. So what are some best ways to really position themselves? It can be within investment banking and finance or in general.
Yeah.
Maybe you've seen candidates applying from abroad or from
Mm,
Korea.
yeah. So yeah, I get this I ask this question a lot. Like I guess like whenever I speak to students in Korea. So I mean, I wish I had a clear answer to this, but to be honest, like the first hurdle is obviously the visa issue, and I'm obviously not an immigration lawyer to opine on it. But all I know is like, although I'm pretty sure a lot of people in this like classroom are much smarter than some of our junior analysts here, banks or U.S. companies rarely sponsor entry-level analysts directly applying from overseas. But that being said, I think some of the practical ways I've seen people pull this off is number one, like target Singapore or Hong Kong first, work there for 2, 3 years, and then request an international transfer to US. Or another route is like obviously getting a top tier MBA or STEM related master's degree in US and getting an OPT. So I usually don't recommend doing like a master's or PhD here or even MBA for American students. But if you're based in Korea or overseas and then you're looking for opportunities US, to be honest, yeah, like getting an MBA or like a STEM field like master's degree is I think the easiest way to get that. And if you're thinking more long term and aiming to expand globally, like sort of down the road, I think that's a great mindset. And to get there, I think you can focus on like two things. The first one is like developing technical skills that are globally transferable because I think finance is like universal and like the types of financial modeling you do in Seoul and New York are basically the same. You need to master accounting, like valuation techniques like DCFs, LBOs. And by masters, like I mean actually knowing how to build them from scratch, not just knowing what they are. So I know like Korean CPA is a massive differentiator if you stay in Korea. And that's absolutely obviously like nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking to apply globally, like you need global signals. So start looking into like American CFA, even just having a level one shows like a global firm or a bank that you are speaking their language, right? And on the flip side, like you also need to realize that your competitive advantage globally isn't about being less Korean. It's about leveraging the fact that you are Korean, I think. So whatever industry you start your career in, like dig deep, understand exactly how like Korea's economy and like trade policies like fit into the broader like geopolitical landscape. And if you can explain Korean market dynamics to like global investors or firms, that will become your superpower when you like eventually try to make the jump.
All right. So what I'm gonna do is conclude kind of the official formal guest lecture here, and then this would actually be the time where we would, if we were doing this in person, we would go out for a really super casual coffee chat. So I'm going to let whoever wants to leave. Please let's thank the guest lecturer again. It is almost 10 o'clock at night in New York, so really. We're grateful to have him today. And then whoever remains, it'll be really casual chat, just Q&A. You can ask questions. You can